turn our attention to the idea of culture and identity and try to understand the relationship between the two. Cultural products like the visual arts, painting for example, or music can be deconstructed. Remember, we've used that term or idea before to try to see how something takes on greater meaning in a particular context. When is a painting not just a painting? When is a song not just a song? What meaning might be embedded within these cultural artifacts? Of particular significance for us is trying to detect whether or not such embedded meaning might also be connected to national identities. In what ways can culture be used to construct national identities, sometimes quite consciously and deliberately? And if culture is being used to develop national identities, what then are the implications in a continent like North America, where one of the three countries is the overwhelming, some academics would use the fancy term hegemonic, force behind a globalizing popular culture? These are just some of the key questions that lie at the heart of our work on this topic, and I'd like you to keep them in the forefront of your mind as we work our way through the parts of this lecture. We begin, though, with another compelling life lived in North America. Frida Kahlo is one of Mexico's most famous painters. Her paintings are spectacular. The vibrant and sometimes jarring images she conveyed in them were inspired, quite often by the equally vibrant and jarring life that she led. Kahlo was born in 1907 in Coyoacan. At the time, it was a small town just outside Mexico City. Today, that city has grown so much that Coyoacan is now one of the 16 boroughs close to the center of the modern-day federal district of Mexico City. Her family home, La Casa Azul, is now a museum that is a very well-known attraction in Coyoacan. The entire neighborhood, with its historic center square, is an extremely popular place to visit. Frida Kahlo's father was a German immigrant. Though he was thought to have been Jewish, some of Kahlo's artwork even reflected on this belief. He was in fact Lutheran. By the time he was 19, he had arrived in Mexico and Spanishized his first name from Wilhelm to Guillermo Kahlo. Kahlo's mother, Matilda Calderoni Gonzalez, was a Roman Catholic and mestizo, though her indigenous roots were considered particularly strong. All the elements of these identities would come to play an important role in Kahlo's very self-reflective style of painting. By all accounts, her parents were in an unhappy marriage. Matilda was Guillermo's second wife after his first had died. It was certainly a busy household. Frida had 3 full sisters and 2 half-sisters. The 2 half-sisters had been the daughters of Guillermo's first wife, and they were raised all together in La Casa Azul. Kahlo would later remember it as a house full of women, but Frida was singled out by her father and was very much considered his favorite. He accepted her rebellious side, which seems to peek through in both the expression on her face and the clothes she wore in this late 1920s family portrait. Kahlo was on the left, dressed in a man's suit. She had a dramatic childhood. In 1910, when she was 3, the Mexican Revolution began, and she would remember her mother rushing her and her sisters into the house as gunfire rang through the streets of Coyoacan. At age 6, she contracted polio, leaving her right leg thinner and less developed than her left. The large, colorful skirts that she came to be known for later in life effectively disguised this. As a teenager, she attended the prestigious Escuela Nacional Preparatoria, a high school that prepared students to attend Mexico's national university. She was one of only 35 girls. It was there that she first fell in love with Alejandro Gomez Arias, a popular student at the school. The two seemed inseparable, and Alex, as Frida would call him, was with her on a fateful day in September 1925. It was rainy as Frida and Alejandro rode on a wooden bus home to Coyoacan. Just as the bus was turning a corner, a trolley car collided with it. The trolley pushed the bus forward. Alejandro later recalled how it seemed to unbelievably bend in the middle until it could bend no more, and then it just exploded into pieces. The trolley then continued to move forward, running over the bus passengers as they lay in the streets. Frida suffered horrific injuries. An iron handrail pierced her straight through the abdomen. Someone at the scene actually pressed his knee against her stomach and actually pulled the rail out. Her screams of pain were said to have drowned out the sound of sirens. Beyond having been impaled, Kahlo had a broken spine, collarbone, ribs, and pelvis. Her right leg was fractured in 11 places. Her right foot was crushed and dislocated, and her shoulder had been dislocated as well. At the hospital, Alejandro had to actually plead with the doctors to treat her because they sincerely thought she was beyond saving. This accident was life-altering in many ways for Kahlo. In the short term, it meant a long period of recovery. She was in a full body cast for some 3 months, but eventually did regain the ability to walk. Still, she would go on to have more than 30 operations in her life as a consequence of this accident, and would have recurring bouts of intense pain that would require her to either be hospitalized or confined to bed for months at a time. On the more positive side, it was the accident that also led to painting. Unable to move about, her family provided her with canvas and paints and encouraged her to paint even from bed. For her painting, she drew heavily from her personal experiences, and one can often see the physical pain she endured in her many self-portraits. In fact, of the 140 or so paintings that she did, more than a third are self-portraits, many incorporating images of physical or psychological pain. Some have considered her artwork to be surrealist. Surrealism was a cultural movement that began in the 1920s. It was attempting to reconcile what are often seen as opposites, dreams and reality. Surrealist paintings were often unnerving and illogical, with strange images created from everyday objects. Paintings by Spanish artist Salvador Dali are often the most widely known images of this art movement. André Breton, considered the founder of the Surrealists, invited Kahlo to Paris for a 1939 exhibition of her work. The Louvre even bought one of her paintings, the first artwork by a 20th century Mexican artist to be purchased by the famous museum. Yet Kahlo resisted the Surrealist label. At times, she was frustrated by her visit to France. She herself said, "I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality." Perhaps it was just a coincidence that her style of painting so resembled the work of the Surrealists. She more readily acknowledged that she was very much influenced by indigenous Mexican culture, and this can be seen particularly with her use of bright colors and dramatic symbolism. Monkeys often featured in her artwork, and in her private life, when she actually sometimes had them as pets. But in Mexican mythology, monkeys are typically associated with lust. Kahlo used them to convey tenderness. When she was still a student at the Escuela Nacional Preparatoria, Kahlo had encountered the great Mexican mural artist Diego Rivera. We'll talk about Rivera and Mexican mural painting in a later part of the lecture. For now, he's interesting to us because of his association with Kahlo. She had shown him some of her early painting, and he proved to be very encouraging. He sincerely believed she had great talent and soon was visiting her at her home. Kahlo's relationship with Alejandro had come to an end in 1928, and she soon fixed her affections on Rivera. The two were married a year later when she was 22 and he was 43. Her mother was not a happy camper. Their marriage was intense. Actually, that's putting it mildly. Each had numerous affairs. Kahlo was bisexual, and Rivera seemed to have less difficulty with her female lovers. But when he once walked in on an intimate moment between Frida and the famous Japanese-American sculptor Isamu Noguchi, he flew into a rage that so frightened Noguchi that the sculptor ran for his life through an open window. Kahlo also had an affair with Leon Trotsky, the famous communist who worked with Lenin to bring about the Russian Revolution. When Trotsky was given political asylum in Mexico in the late 1930s, he first lived with Rivera and Kahlo. Rivera was certainly no saint either. For Kahlo, Rivera crossed the line when he decided to have an affair with her favorite sister. The two divorced in 1939, but they were so connected that they remarried just a year later. Little changed, though. They remained as tumultuous a couple as ever. The peculiar living arrangements perhaps helped. The house, or should I say houses, where they lived, were joined by a bridge. Kahlo could walk the bridge from her side. Just a week after her 47th birthday, she died following a year of difficult and declining health. She never fully recovered from an operation to amputate her right leg below the knee to deal with an infection that had turned to gangrene. The pain was overwhelming, and Kahlo had become increasingly dependent on morphine for relief. There is in fact a possibility that her death was the result of an overdose, perhaps accidental. Much of Kahlo's artistic work was not fully appreciated until decades after her death. She became better known in the 1970s and 1980s. There were best-selling biographies and even a Hollywood film starring Salma Hayek. In 2006, her painting Roots sold at auction for $5.6 million, a record for a Kahlo painting. Madonna is rumored to have been the purchaser. as the singer owns other Kahlo originals. Kahlo's life story is incredibly compelling, and we'll hear more about her husband, Diego Rivera, when we turn our attention to Mexican mural painting in another part of the lecture. But that's it for now. We'll see you in part 2.
so I didn't pick it up. Because didn't you already see one of them? My hand was melted. There was another one that was more melted than that.
I'll grab my laptop out. Just because yours is talking.
How long were we gone for?